They want to go quick with Hogan to the rack and one. Flush, chucks it up, it's caught! Dagger!
Oh, she's gonna hit the gas. One-on-one, boom!
Welcome back for Season 2, Episode 4 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Last week, baseball was back, and the first week had a lot of wild goings-on. Plus, the April Fool's memes that were spread all around the internet made us laugh, hopefully, a little bit. The NBA 4-point line and the Aaron Rodgers retiring saga, those were fake, at least for now, but I think we can all rest a little bit easier knowing that neither can be all that far away, he said desperately. So, out of the span of 3 episodes, I'll be starting with March Madness twice. It's safe to say I really got into it this year. A big part of the reason why, I won a bracket pool of 84 players. Like everyone else, I got some things wrong. Like everyone else, I struggled mightily to find scenarios in which all 4 of the 1 seeds would actually make it through to the Final Four. And yet, of course they all did. The only Final Four pick I missed on was actually Michigan State, and even then, not by a ton. I had Michigan over Auburn as one of the bigger upsets in my whole bracket because the all 1 seeds left thing, it just had only ever happened one other time in the history of the tournament. Nonetheless, the best teams are the best for a reason. I didn't have many dramatic misses. I had 6 out of 8 Elite 8 teams too, and I'd love to say that it's elite ball knowledge only. Still, I had 53 total correct picks. That was kind of fun. How did I pick the right 2 teams in the championship game? I loved the way Houston could just seemingly stop any and every offense. They had to play the second highest scoring team in the nation, Gonzaga. That was a shootout. Then they held 4-seed Purdue and 2-seed Tennessee under 60 points each. That was absolutely masterful. There was plenty of evidence suggesting that Florida had the best chance of beating all good teams and closing out top teams late in close games too. Walter Clayton Jr. Where do we start with this guy for the early part of the tournament? He was completely superlative. More on that later. Plus, he's probably shot his draft stock way up this year. He was already pretty likely to be drafted, and maybe towards the end of the first round, start of the second. But now I think you're talking about a possible top 10 pick from a roughly Steph Curry-sized combo guard. He's not particularly big. You're talking 6'3", 195. That just doesn't happen at that size, going top 10 without otherworldly skill. The league has trended so much more toward even guards having to have kind of the prototypical size, speed, strength combo. Clayton's regular season numbers would never have really blown people away, 15.3 points a game for mostly a 4-year starter, but just use your eyes, watch the entire tournament back, and tell me he's not going to eventually be an NBA starter. People are comparing the run that he had for most of this tournament to some of the Kemba Walker at UConn's and the Draymond Green with Michigan State's, the best all-around performances throughout a whole championship run ever. Coming into the championship game, he was over 24 points a game for the tournament and put a career-high 34 on Auburn in the Final Four, no less, in a matchup of 1 seeds. As for the championship game itself, we got the 2 best teams in the land. We had seen them both make some sick comebacks. We had seen them both get pushed to the absolute brink, and their gas tanks just never looked empty. Then, Walter Clayton disappeared. Florida has some other good offensive options. You've got Elijah Martin. He's a top transfer over there, 5th-year guy. Their top big, Alex Condon, and their point guard, Will Richard. Those guys all average double digits. But it was like the best player in the tournament for the entire first half and then some was the worst player on the floor for the championship. That was scary. Houston's shot selection was absolutely audacious and a little bit dumb, but their defense was as tight as ever, so it went into the half with the lowest score in a championship game since 2008, I believe, if I recall the stat on the broadcast right. Shout out to the ESPN Stats and Information Department again. They do incredible work, and I don't think they're appreciated enough. And they can give somebody like me something to talk about from literally every game, no matter how interesting it was or maybe wasn't. Then in the second half, around the 13 to 14 minute mark, There was a 9-second span where Houston picked up 3 fouls. There was a few turnovers that came right after that. Funny how those tend to go together. And it all led to a 9-0 run that put Florida all the way back in it. They only trailed by 3 at the half, but I believe the largest deficit coming out of the second half was a dozen. After that 9-0 run, from that point on, it was pretty much within 6 the entire way with a bunch of ties and lead changes down the stretch. That is the absolute best thing you can get in a championship game. Then one huge live ball turnover by Houston at 26.6 seconds gave Florida the ball and a 1-point lead. They almost turned it right back over off an inbound play. Houston committed a foul with the double bonus on. Florida splits the free throws, whereas maybe if they had hit both of those, they could have just won it outright at that point. Houston calls their last timeout around 16 seconds. Then they choose to go for the win with a 3 on their last possession, and they can't get off a shot. Emmanuel Sharp couldn't touch the ball again after he lost it without getting a double dribble called on him. What a sequence, and again, chills. Such a fitting ending, and it should have gone down to that last possession, to that last second, just like it did. That was poetic. These were probably the 2 most battle-tested teams in the entire country. Maybe you could argue Alabama because they also had that insane SEC regular season and the conference tournament slate to deal with too. LJ Cryer was Houston's All-American, albeit third team, still a fantastic player. He was the only consistent offensive option for Houston most of the night too, though, and was the only guy to end up in double figures for them. I'm tempted to think that if Houston could have lived around the rim, if they could have found a post option that would draw some double teams, maybe get somebody from Florida defensively more in foul trouble, then they'd have a little bit more staying power when they had that dozen-point lead. They ended up being mostly an ISO jump shooting offense, and some teams are good enough to win with that, but it's also how you only end up with 5 assists on 24 made field goals. Not so good. This game lived up to all the hype and then some. The tourney last year was interesting, but it was also the entire field versus UConn, one of the most dominant teams and runs ever, and guess who won? The thing that we're always supposed to do with the tournament is expect chaos and upsets, and that whatever you think teams' identities are, that's not what they end up being. With this tournament, if you had played 0 upsets at all, and you just rode with 1 seeds everywhere and then just flipped a coin between them when it came down to the Final Four, you'd actually have a really good chance of winning. That's so wild. I am not usually finding myself getting romantic about basketball. And I suppose romantic isn't even the right word, but I wouldn't be talking this way if I hadn't won my bracket pool, most likely. Sometimes you got to celebrate the little wins, you know what I mean? It's nearly time to put the whole college basketball season to bed, but I am really glad I decided to get so into it this year. If it couldn't be my beloved Michigan State Spartans holding up the banner for Tom Izzo, then I'm happy it's a coach as young as Todd Golden with Florida. 39 years old and only in year 3, I believe. I hate to say it, but one of my first thoughts after the game when he was being interviewed was his price just went way up. They're either going to have to give him an insane contract extension or let him walk to go to a place that will. Then I looked up his actual contract, which I had no idea about previously. He was making about $4 million a year through the 2029 season. That is less than half of the top mark, which is Bill Self right now. And for the youngest championship-winning coach in over 40 years, since Jim Valvano, I don't think that's going to cut it. You know, you're talking 8 to possibly 10 plus mil a year when it is time to give him that extension. He built a program super analytically. He didn't pilfer and poach players through the transfer portal and NIL money, and he did not blink in those biggest moments in a championship game that had all of the ties and the lead changes, and it was just artful coaching. Best team in the nation, one of the best coaches in the nation, and thank you, Florida Gators, for winning me money. Couple more things to get to this week. The NFL's recent and maybe upcoming rule changes. The big one last year was the dynamic kickoff. How blue in the face did we get talking about that? And that is seemingly going to be around for quite a while, but there is a caveat coming. In order to further force kickoff teams to put the ball in play, The touchback spot is going to move from the 30-yard line up to the 35. The wild part is, as my understanding goes, that's only 5 yards from the spot still where a kickoff out of bounds puts the ball. I have to look into that a little bit deeper and make sure that that's still going to be the case, but it seems like it would be. The percentage of kickoffs that were returned last year was still, relatively a little bit lower than the league wanted, but in an absolute sense, it is definitely going up. The whole kickoff rule was supposed to be a 1-year trial with the option to be adopted full-time, and after the winter meetings this year, we know that it will be. Considering the state of kickoffs in 2023, when the return rate was the lowest it had ever been, and arguably the decade or so before that, it was good enough. Teams crafted some creative blocking assignments. Guys were still able to get up to full speed and take some kicks to the house. Eventually, we'll need more data on it to say, okay, this definitely does or doesn't change injury rates. But for the sheer guaranteeing that kickoffs will be returned, it does work. The next and possibly final major rule change of this offseason, assuming it even gets voted on and especially adopted, is banning the Tush Push. I had predicted this back in the playoffs maybe, but when the Eagles had started to really rely on it more for third or fourth and short yardage and not necessarily just goal line attempts, and they were practically 100% on it. Then there was the AFC Championship game, and the Chiefs wrecked the Bills every time they went to do it. I believe Buffalo went 0 for 3 on it in that game, and I got a little quiet about it. I was thinking other teams could just take the tape from that game, watch what the Chiefs did, and follow it exactly. Now, I'm actually about to be a champion for it because I think that as long as you're following what we know the guidelines of football to be for an offensive play, you need 11 players. You can't have more than 4 in the backfield, eligible receivers in the right spots, etc. I have said this before. Offenses should be able to run literally whatever they want. Period. I don't think the league should have any say in what plays can or can't be run. Why would there be any further risk of injury from a tush push than a fullback or a halfback dive? And this is a slower speed collision, so I would bet it's even less than any of those. There should be a good amount of data from the last 2 years, especially when the Eagles started taking over the world with it, if the league needs that. But more than anything, I think don't create a problem out of nowhere. Now here's where the tush push actually stands. The vote was just tabled last week, and if I had thought of it, I could have included some of the jokes or the memes around that in the April Fool's section of last episode. Nonetheless, all 32 owners get to vote on proposed rule changes. I've always wondered what the Packers do, by the way, because they're still the only publicly owned team. Yeah, if anybody wants to drop a comment enlightening us about how that would work, it'd be greatly appreciated. Anyway, the league just isn't ready to put this to a final vote yet. I don't know if that means that they'll get to it before training camp or before the start of the regular season or what. I'm not sure what kind of deadline they would need to make a decision either way. The most poetic thing about the initial discussions at those league winter meetings is that exactly 16 teams were reported to support banning it, or half the league. I'm guessing out of the remaining 16 teams that some were totally for keeping it in, like the Eagles obviously, but some were probably indifferent too. There were of course plenty of quotes that came out from those meetings. The Rams' Sean McVay said the play doesn't look like football to him, so that's sort of an aesthetic issue and one of the weaker arguments against the tush push that I've heard. I could also argue that a double reverse pass doesn't necessarily look like football to a lot of people, but it's been run for many decades. The Jets' new head coach Aaron Glenn says it's his responsibility to stop the play no matter who's running it, and that's the single argument I like most. I think defense is so reactive and alignment and assignment are so crucial that it is possible to defend literally every offensive play that could be conceived. Again, the Chiefs ate the Bills alive when Buffalo tried to run tush pushes in the second biggest game of the year. Yes, I think the Eagles were just that much better than the Commanders, so I don't put the NFC Championship game on exactly the same level as the AFC Championship game from this year. The question is not if it can be stopped at all, because everything can. The question is what technique, personnel, and maybe exploits does defense use eventually to turn that tush push into a bigger gamble for the offense. The Chiefs and their evil empire figured it out against one of the biggest, strongest QBs the league's ever seen, Josh Allen, so we know it can be done. I would like to see the tush push stick around and just see the different kind of interesting ways that defense would try to defend it, but eventually it will come down to a vote, and I'll be following that closely. The NBA regular season also wraps up this Sunday the 13th. That is crazy. LeBron needs a couple of big games to get his scoring average over 25 points a game, which he's done every single season of his career except as a 19-year-old rookie. I would bet on him taking a ton of shots, and everyone kind of knowing in the back of their mind how close this milestone is. As of Thursday night, he's at 24.6 points a game, and the Lakers can't go any higher than third place in the West behind the Rockets and Thunder with 2 more games to play. That said, they could also be caught by the Nuggets or the Clippers, and then your playoff matchup gets a little bit less enticing. All that means that they still have a ton to play for. They won Luka's return/revenge game in Dallas pretty handily, but their last 2 with the Rockets and the Blazers are huge. We've also known that the Thunder and Cavaliers were going to be the number 1 seeds for quite a while, but everything else is 100% wide open, and I think I'm going to do the whole NBA playoff preview for next week. Then I don't have to try and predict all of the play-in games for all the teams that are just going to go out and get crushed in the first round anyways. The Cavs didn't end up having as much staying power as I thought they would, or as the Thunder did this year. Because if you recall, towards the beginning of the season with that insane start, people were almost questioning, man, is that 73 wins with the 15 Warriors in reach? Not how it shook out by any means, but they have completely run away with the East still. At the time of recording, the Thunder check in at 66-14, and that alone makes me think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going to win MVP over Nikola Jokic. Unfortunate, considering how many things Jokic did this year that no one has ever done and will probably never do again. But SGA is at 32.7 points a game. He's second in the league in steals, and he has the best plus-minus in the league by miles. If you've heard that one and you're not quite sure what it refers to, the Thunder have outscored opponents by 1,020 points this year, while SGA is on the floor in 80 games. Second place is, I always butcher this, but I believe it's Ivica Zubac, the Clippers center, with plus 750. Jokic is fourth in the league in plus-minus and is as dominant, probably more dominant than ever. But I also liken this to the Josh Allen versus Lamar Jackson MVP race. There is always voter fatigue after some point, after some degree of sustained excellence, where people just don't want to vote for the same person every year. Jokic has won 3 of the last 4 MVPs, and I just don't see him making it 4 out of 5, even though he has a legit chance at averaging 30 points and a triple-double. But here we are, it's the modern NBA, and it's just the entire impact that SGA has on a game and closing out games. We spitball a couple of things at you before we wrap this one up. I may have to go harder on college basketball next year, personally, and here on the show. I feel like I can do no wrong right now, you know what I mean? It makes me want to put some money even on fantasy football, maybe? I'm already wanting to make mock drafts and position rankings, and we're not even at the NFL draft yet. Aaron Judge continues to be much better at baseball than anyone else alive. He has already hit 6 home runs, that's tied for the most, and is also leading the league in RBIs with 20 at time of recording. The Dodgers took 9 tries to lose a game, but they finally did. And the batting average leader is super interesting. 35-year-old Astros legend George Springer, who's now in year 4 with Toronto, is still over 400. I always defend this sport, but I will fully admit that baseball in a small sample size is usually more fun than baseball in a large sample size for most people. This kind of thing can happen for a few weeks or a month at a time, and when it does, just smile and savor it. What do you say? Same time, same place next week? As always, check out my many socials, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, at The Voice of Tanner, YouTube, just The Voice of Tanner, X, at Voice of Tanner. Peace. This has been Season 2, Episode 4 of White Noise Sports with Tanner White. Thanks for joining me. They want to go quick with Hogan to the rack and one! Flush, chucks it up, it's caught! Dagger!
But she's gonna hit the gas. What I want, boom!